Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. A very warm welcome to today's webinar. We're just going to give a couple more minutes to get people settled, and then we'll kick the webinar off. So for those of you, and I'll repeat this message again, we're really excited to bring the evolution of FlexDeploy and ConfigSnapshot into the one Flexagon platform. Anyway, go and grab a quick coffee or whatever you must do, and we'll start in a minute or so. Okay, let's get the show on the road. What's new for FlexDeploy and ConfigSnapshot? Introducing the Unified Flexagon Platform. I'm delighted to welcome you to this webinar. My name is Ash Owen. I run the marketing, and we're going to get cracking straight away. A few housekeeping measures to begin with. As we go through the presentation and through the demos, do place questions in the Q&A. We will be monitoring it, and we will also pick up the Q&A at the end. The presentation and video recording will be shared with participants via email, so no need to raise that as a question. And of course, we would encourage you either through this presentation and demonstration or post-presentation to reach out to schedule a demo of the Flexagon platform. With that, I'm delighted to welcome the Flexagon participants. I've covered myself, but joining me and participating in the presentation and demo, Eric Jones, Gordon Halley, and Rebecca Proust, two solution architects. Rebecca, of course, our customer success manager. And I'm going to just quickly brief the agenda. I'm going to hand over to Gordon shortly. We're going to run through a few presentation slides, then we'll hit the demos, and then Q&A. It's a very simple agenda. Okay, Gordon, over to you.
Right. Well, good afternoon, good morning all, and many thanks for joining the session. Getting into kind of what's new in FlexDeploy or Flexagon release 10 new platform. The big chunk of that that we'll be looking at today will be the configuration management piece and how that's sort of now integrating in. So if you come through to the next slide, Ash. For those of you are existing users of FlexDeploy and those of you from the ConfigSnapshot side of things, it is now officially a marriage made in heaven and live as of Monday of this week. So what's happened? So we have now spent the last few months, huge amount of work and efforts gone into things, but we are now live. So what we have on this colourful sandwich here is a simplified sort of overview of kind of how the various different pieces fit together. So we've got sort of the DevOps platform as was with FlexDeploy. You'll see this new element sort of being added in here, so the configuration management piece. And this is essentially where the ConfigSnapshot functionality provides that very broad, very rich, very mature configuration management functionality into the broader platform. So this is now, again, we'll take you through a bit of a roadmap around things, but this is now live and available within the broader platform. So what happens next? So in terms of the kind of the next phase of the configuration management journey, there are two streams, as you can see on the slide here. So the top one is a little bit more Fusion Cloud. The lower one is the Oracle e-business suite. So as of now, January, this release has successfully been delivered, and as I say, is now available. So that initial release is focused on the Fusion Cloud applications, and that enables the the configuration or config snapshot sort of functionality within FlexDeploy. So all of the ability to extract the configuration reports, BR100s, FD or MC50s, application configuration documents, etc. Run the comparisons, do the change tracking through the baselines, and then obviously starting to sort of integrate into the broader FlexDeploy platform. There will be then a secondary release. So in April, we will then add to that existing functionality for cloud, but adding in the ability to load and migrate setup across multiple cloud environments. So pushing things through the pipelines, dev, test, UAT, ultimately through to production. So as I say, that is coming out as part of the April release. Coverage-wise will be very much the same sort of coverage that we have in ConfigSnapshot as it stands today. So it will be, again, a very comprehensive initial release of that. And then if you look down in the Oracle EBIS Suite sort of side of things, that will be the same sort of time that the initial release for the EBIS Suite gets deployed. So again, like the cloud release, that will provide for the e-business suite, again, that ability to document, compare, track changes, etc. there. And then there'll be a secondary release for the EBIS suite side of things in May, introducing, again, that ability to load, migrate, setups, etc. For EBIS suite across multiple EBIS suite environments. Okay, but then sort of continuing on from that, you know, that is not job done. Obviously, this will continue to evolve. We will be rolling into the platform additional elements of the existing config snapshot functionality as is. So this will be quite similar for both EBIS Suite and Cloud at this stage. So you'll have the full audit tracking, which is a much more granular level view of what changes are coming through. You'll have online inquiry, which is rather than running reports, you can have a live view into live Cloud or EBIS Suite environments. Very useful if you're sort of going through sort of issue resolution and you need to track stuff through things. It can be a very sort of efficient way to do that. Matrix reporting is where you're getting sort of easier views of some fairly complex sets of data, typically around things like system profile options, all the user access side of things. There's a lot of complex sets of data in these enterprise applications, and the matrix style reports just kind of present them in much sort of more clear, concise sort of formats for you. Following on from that, Q3, Q4, record notes. So again, the ability to tag notes. Parent, child, grandchild sort of levels. So typical use cases there, things like change and release management, tying stuff back to that sort of stuff. Impact analysis, so upgrade impact analysis, for example, in the EBIS suite. So identifying customizations, and then if you're upgrading and patching, how and where they're going to be impacted, how to fix them. And then the extensibility, which allows you to kind of extend the core functionality provided by the configuration management as it comes out of the box, but extending that to other things that perhaps we don't cater for. So you might have other customizations, for example, that have configuration detail within them that you would like to treat in a similar sort of way to how you can treat EBIS Suite and Cloud. So that kind of extensibility is a toolkit that kind of enables that. So that's all coming soon. And again, obviously the journey will continue onwards from there. And again, perhaps expanding out further Oracle applications, and then perhaps even out to Salesforce and it's SAP, etc. So again, there's an awful lot to keep doing. There's the paint is always being applied. As I say, you finish painting the bridge, you start all over again. So got a lot of work to continue doing, but expanding out that functionality to really sort of make the platform even more beneficial.
Real quick before we move on, Gordon, we had a question in the chat, and I think it's a good one that we should level set on and make sure that everyone understands before we move forward. So the question is, will this be released as one platform, but with new functionality released over time? So if you just want to make sure that that's really clear to everyone that, it's one platform with the configuration management capability added, but we're continuing to build on the DevOps platform inside as well, and that will become more clear. But Gordon, if you want to just speak to that briefly.
Absolutely, it's yeah, very much the whole point really. It is a combined platform. So yes, all that functionality, and when we get into the product demos again, we'll start to sort of show how that sort of integration sort of works as well. So yes, very much the case, single platform, similar sort of style in terms of user interfaces, etc. But yeah, fully integrated, and providing a common approach to how everything is handled, dealt with, etc. Okay. Now, I'm not going to dwell on this slide for too long. What I will do is I'll come back to this in a product demo so you can actually see it firsthand. But very quickly, the front end of obviously the configuration management side of things, so kind of what ConfigSnapshot was, that will be built out on that same sort of platform as FlexDeploy. So completely sort of the newest, latest technology, so much cleaner, more productive sort of user interface, much more performant, and then also providing that ability to document the settings, compare and track changes to them, track changes over time, entity level compares, patch impact analysis, etc. So a lot of functionality, but as I say, I'll do it better justice when we get into the actual product demo itself. So that's the configuration management piece. And now if I hand over to Eric, if you want to cover the FlexDeploy platform updates.
All right, thanks, Gordon. So obviously configuration management is really the linchpin of the release since the acquisition of Rookery Software back in April. But to use Gordon's analogy of painting the bridge, right? The journey for FlexDeploy continues as well. Configuration management integration is a big part of that, but there's a lot of evolution to the platform. So just to highlight a few things that I will show in the demo a little bit later. And there's a lot, there's release notes, there's a lot of different stuff, but I just pulled together some of the most high impact items to cover here. And it starts with the deployment audit report. So it's another way to visualize and present changes that are more appropriate for audit. And so you'll see that there's capability to customize the audit, whether it's renaming columns, presenting data in context to better get through audit. We've had a number of support tickets and questions that have drove us to make some significant improvements through this new report. And then health monitoring. There's within the FlexDeploy dashboards, you can track, infrastructure level detail of FlexDeploy. So if you're facing bottlenecks in your process, you can see if you're constrained in any way by the infrastructure of FlexDeploy, and it will also help our support team to help you should you face any performance type issues. And then the in-app notification, you see this in a lot of modern web application platforms today. Instead of all notifications having to go through email, be notified to the application itself. So if people are within the application, not having to swap back and forth between email. So I'll demo those first three items a little bit later in the webinar. But the other two items are the script versioning. So depending on the level of customizations you have within FlexDeploy, there's places where you're using Groovy scripting. So we've just improved the development experience there. So the ability to save all of your changes as different versions so that you can perform differences or even restore to another version. So just another productivity feature of the overall platform. I've highlighted Salesforce here for those that have non-Oracle as well. There's some pretty significant performance improvements between, with the comparisons and other areas within the product. But I'll also say that performance was a, kind of a key aspect of what went into the overall platform. So you'll see a number of performance improvements across the platform as well. Performance is obviously difficult to demo, so I won't be covering that piece, but hand it back to you, Gordon.
Take myself off mute, apologies. So what I'll do is just share my screen and I'll actually take you through a bit of an introduction to the new shared platform and taking a look at the configuration management element of that. Okay, so hopefully that is coming through now.
You got it.
You got that. Okay, so What we are now looking at is essentially Flexagon 10. So this is the updated release. And the component or area that I'm currently looking at is the configuration management side of things. So you can see, if you're familiar with FlexDeploy already, it is a very sort of familiar looking format, all the same technology, etc. So it is, as I say, it's written all on the same platform. When you come into the application, just like you do in other areas, the first sort of landing page will be the dashboards. So again, configurable in terms of what it is you want to see on these sort of these pages. So again, based a little bit on the role you're performing. So what is kind of important for you to see when you first log in. But again, I'm going to sort of whiz through things fairly quickly today, just in the interest of time, and just to make sure I do leave a bit of time for to cover the other areas. But for those of you who are existing ConfigSnapshot users, again, a lot of the functionality that we'll go through in just a second, it will hopefully feel quite familiar. So a lot of that sort of, that rich capability to give you that clear visibility, understanding, the concise views of the configuration settings. Again, that is all carried forward into the platform. So as I say, a lot of this hopefully will look fairly familiar to you. So the first thing that I'm going to look at are what we call these processes. And for ConfigSnapshot users as is, there's a little bit of similarity to these between what we call configuration sets in ConfigSnapshot today. But these are kind of things that you might want to have rerunning, sort of repeatable processes, maybe scheduled to run daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, whatever you like. So various sort of different sort of reports, different compares, different sort of baseline requirements, etc. So really sort of looking to build in automation around that sort of general business as usual configuration management piece. And I've got a few examples on the workbench in front of me here. So I've got a bunch of steps, maybe these audit steps. So some of the more sensitive areas across cloud that I perhaps want to keep a fairly sort of close eye on. And then I've got some other sort of favorites that I might have, just as I say, scheduling those to run on a sort of fairly regular basis. But as I say, it is a joint platform. And one of the sort of key benefits of that will be then the ability to start making better use of that additional functionality provided by FlexDeploy. So the ability to use workflows, use pipelines, etc., to actually start taking things like these processes and then kind of chaining them together in a sequence of events that need to flow through to meet different sort of business requirements. And kind of a fairly sort of simple example I've got on here is if you're going through a quarterly patch update process, for example. So a lot of you will be going to 26A shortly. But as, again, a very simplified view of that is before Oracle take my environment away to patch it up, what I'm first want to do is generate what we call a baseline. And a baseline is literally a copy of, in this example, might be all of my configuration across all areas. When you're using it more generally, you can obviously target particular areas that might be of interest, but kind of pre-patch, I want to grab a copy of all my existing settings as they stand at that sort of, just before Oracle apply the patch update. I might then have a manual process or a time-based event whereby somebody will confirm that the environment has been upgraded by Oracle and is now back and available for the next stage of the process to kick in. So the next stage of the process, in this example, would be to kick off a bunch of comparison reports. So again, split out maybe by different areas, depending on who wants to consume the output of these sort of reports, etc. And that would essentially compare the pre-patch settings from the baseline against the post-patch settings, and essentially give you a comparison for, again, as I say, split out in this case for financials, HCM, maybe some of the user access side of things, system profiles and that sort of good stuff. So as I say, that would then just obviously filter out to the various different parties that are interested in reviewing that detail. But as I say, as a process can be chained together as a series of things that need to happen in a particular order. So really, as I say, using that functionality to build in that automation. And I've got another example that I'll come back to towards the end of the demo. But again, in the interest of time, I just want to, I'll kick off one of these as an example. So as I say, for my HCM, I'm just going to kick off a process and I'm just going to tell it to run a simple report against my Dev 11 environment. Okay, and literally that's now going off to that live Dev 11 instance. And based on the contents of my process here, it'll start to extract out the settings that I've requested. So if I have a quick look at the requests that are running, okay, I can see kind of what's going on with this. I can sort of drill into the detail a little bit. We can see in this particular example, this extract is including a couple of steps from absence management and a bunch from HCM. Okay, so again, those processes can include any combination of steps in any part of cloud in any order you want them, with all sorts of embedded filters, etc. within them. I can also explore the run options that were embedded, any executions that are going. Okay, so again, I've got all the relevant detail, and obviously if there were any issues, etc., I can look at the logs and perhaps review any of that. But we can see that has now successfully run. And this one's been run out to Microsoft Excel. So if we just have a quick look at the detail generated, let's have a quick look at that. So opening that up for me. And into the detail. So again, those of you who are existing users of ConfigSnapshot, again, a fairly familiar view here. Again, the color coding will evolve, and obviously you have the ability to tweak and refine that as needed. But here we obviously have the things like date and timestamps, the type of report this is, any entities selected, the environment it was run against, so all those sort of key run parameters that you need. And then as we'll see in the extract, there will be, again, that same color coding is embedded into the extracts to, again, give you that visual understanding as to where the settings have come from. So the key here just explains what the various different color codes all mean. And then, as I say, this particular example just focused on a few steps from different sort of HCM areas. You also then have this sort of the record counts. Okay, so if you were expecting to see, so if we take, for example, the grades here, in this environment, there are 362 of them. This report, however, is only showing 7. Now, the reason for that is actually because I've applied a filter. So I just want to see any grades that start with a naming convention of K12. Okay, now because there is a lot of capability and about 10,000 different filtering options within the configuration management side of things, this record count check is quite a useful one. So if you were expecting to see all records and you're not, again, it just sort of alerts you to, well, obviously there's a filter applied somewhere, or you've excluded Oracle seeded settings, etc., and hence why it would be that different. Okay, so it gives you that flexibility, but again, that's quite a useful way to sort of cross-check things. Again, if I have a quick look at the actual detail generated, okay, so this is just a standard extract. So we've got the default menu path. I tend to like to include that when I run things. So again, if you're working in an area of cloud you're not that familiar with, again, that can be a useful way to understand where to sort of navigate within cloud to find it. And then we can see that the detail generated, so as I say, the black text is end user setup, so stuff that has been introduced to support this particular business requirements of this installation. Red text is essentially untouched Oracle seeded setup. So red text is setup provided by Oracle, either out of the box or they've added it in through things like the quarterly patch updates, but it has not been modified by anybody other than Oracle. Okay, and again, in some areas of cloud, there is an awful lot of that. So as I say, you always have the option, if you choose, to tell it to filter that out. Then again, you've got different ways to present this. So this is kind of what we call our widescreen option. Okay, so where you've got kind of a parent and then you've got child levels. So it's kind of indented the child level. So it's clear to see the parent that record actually belongs to. So at the parent level, this is an Oracle seeded record, but the associated types obviously are implementation specific. Probably a clearer example of that is when it comes to the grades here. So here we've got the parent level at the top. And obviously here there are quite a few child values down below here. So again, there are all sorts of different ways that it will format the detail. And again, how we get it to present that, again, it's a kind of a user preference thing. So how do you like to kind of work with the detail? Okay. And then some other examples here. Again, in this case, quite a lot of seeded data and so on. Okay, so you get the sort of flavor there. It is a clear, concise view, no internal IDs, no database values. and formatted in a very similar way to how you would expect to see the detail if you were looking at it through the standard Oracle form. So as I say, very deliberately designed to aid understanding, so presenting it in a way that is aiding and sort of optimizing how you can make informed decisions, etc. Okay, so that is a very simple extract. And that's obviously, as I say, I've driven that just through a process. But you also have this sort of ad hoc reporting as well. And again, for those of you familiar with ConfigSnapshot, again, this is kind of your traditional sort of workbench area where you can potentially run things sort of on a modular sort of basis. As I say, kind of looking into particular issues, or you're putting together maybe a scope of some sort of deployment you're going to go through. And obviously within cloud, you might have this sort of modular view, but you also within cloud, you have Oracle have, again, different views of how they present the sort of various different settings. So again, depending on your preference, again, you can obviously switch between the sort of the offering sort of views and the modules, but again, other ways to sort of pull that through. Now, I'm kind of more from the EBIS suite world, and my brain kind of works more of in a modular sort of format. But as I say, you can kind of work with this how you choose. So what I'll do now is, again, I'll just run a couple of simple examples, again, just to give you a quick flavor of the power and flexibility of it. So here I'm going to stick with now, I've done a bit of HCM, so let's have a quick look at some of the financials. Okay, so within that, various different products, different modules. So let's have a quick look at good old accounts payable. And this time round, what I'm going to do is I'm going to run an entity comparison. So I'm going to compare my Dev 11 environment against this Dev 9. Now, if I happen to have some other cloud environments, I might now select, this could be Dev, Test, Prod, UAT. It could be really any number of different cloud environments. So I'm not limited to just compare two at a time, but I'm just going to stick with the two for the purpose of today. Okay. Now, again, it is entity aware, so it understands the steps in this particular area do have an entity level split. So I'm going to go in and I'm going to select my my US 1 business unit. Again, you can pick and choose as many or as few as you want. And then you do have all sorts of different options here. And again, for those of you familiar with ConfigSnapshot already, again, lots of familiar sort of formatting or ways of targeting particular detail that you want to see. Mine, again, here we've got various different preferences popping through. So in this case, I've just defaulted it to include Oracle seeded. If I didn't want to see that, obviously I can just deselect it. Okay, so you can override the defaults when you come through. I could also, if I wanted to, I could extract and target with this extract entries and updates made by particular users or groups of users. Okay, so I don't have to just run it for everything. Again, lots of ways to target different things. Do I want to include deactivated data? Do I want to put date and time restrictions? So just show me entries and updates created by a particular user or group of users since a particular date and time. As I say, lots of different ways to use the various options together to very precisely target what I'm looking for. I like to include the default menu path, and again, I do like that option to indent the child levels. Now, in this case, I'm running a comparison. Okay, so the differences area kind of controls how much detail I'm going to see here. So generally, when you're running comparisons, you are probably just looking for the differences only. However, there are times where it can be useful to see everything, and obviously within that, highlight where the differences are. But sometimes you need to, perhaps you're loading stuff. You might want to prove what was in your plan, kind of your intention of what you loaded versus what actually ended up happening. Having a report that shows everything, well, shows essentially nothing in it because there are no differences. Sometimes you actually want to provide that proof that things really did load properly, okay? Or if you're working with audit and you need to provide evidence that things have not changed, again, that show all fields, again, very useful for in those sort of scenarios. I will include the record history. So again, that will show me who created the records, who last updated them, etc. Okay. And then the final stage, these are all the steps owned by this particular module. So I could just run it for everything. But again, for the purpose of today, I'll be a little bit more selective. So just going to run a few areas there. And again, same sort of filters you'll see in ConfigSnapshot. So again, I do have the ability, all sorts of different operator types in here. I don't have to run it for all of my records. I could just say here, just run it for these specific ones. Okay, so lots of flexibility, as I say, to highly target just the detail I want to work with. Okay, so I have now kicked that process off. So again, like the previous one, that's now going off to those 2 live cloud environments. There is no requirement for any pre-extract process to run. This is a live compare. I know I'm going to be seeing and working with the absolute up-to-date version of the configuration settings in both of these cloud instances. And again, if I just go into that process, you can see the various steps I chose there, and you can see it has already completed. So probably about 80% faster than the existing version of ConfigSnapshot. So there's a lot of performance benefits as well to moving on to the broader platform. Again, I've run this one to HTML, date and time stamped, all the run options, etc., the color coding and so on. Table of contents, all hyperlinked in HTML. So again, if I want to sort of whiz down to a relevant area, I can just click on that and it'll take me to the different parts. But then we scroll down to the detail itself. So here on the payment terms, again, we've got the default menu path I like to see. I did apply a filter for this particular step. Okay, so all the relevant detail around that. Okay, and then we've got the actual detail from this comparison. So we've got my Dev 11 environment in this central column and Dev 9 in the right-hand column. So the yellow is indicating where it is finding differences. So in this first one, looks like somebody's made an update to a descriptive flex field, so added in an additional context in there. Again, I've included the Oracle record history, so I can also then see who made the change and when. So Finimple user on the 13th of January. Here we've got a difference in the description by the looks of it, again made by Finimple on the 19th of January. In this case, it looks like they've just removed a full stop at the end of the description there. And then down below, we've got this numeric difference. So that's the sort of thing you're going to be looking for. Why has that changed? And then if we scroll down again, we've got another numeric difference here. So in Dev 9, on this term line, we see here, if we take or pay this invoice off, or wherever this payment term is applied, if you pay within 2 days, you get a very healthy 60% discount. So again, might want to have another little chat with the Finimple user. Again, is that something that really should be in place? So again, that's a pretty generous discount. Again, scroll down, we've got some other examples here. So here in Dev 11, we've got a record in red text. And again, if we look at the record history, we can see this is a seeded Oracle record. Okay, so again, the red color coding, again, even without the record history, would indicate that that's Oracle making these type of updates. But we can actually see in Dev 9 that the standard version of this record from Oracle has been updated. So we can actually see the 2 sort of updates that have been made. So obviously the description's been updated, and this allow manual release has been switched from the default yes to no. Okay, again, same user, date and time around that. But also useful to note, obviously when this record was untouched, it's in the red text. When it's been modified, it's actually gone to a sort of a brown color. So indicating that it was originally an Oracle record, but has been obviously modified by the end user at some point. And obviously here we can see exactly what they've done. But again, that color coding, slight sort of difference there, helping understand that type of change. Now, this example below, we've got a lot of orange. Now, the orange in this case indicates that this is a record that has been end dated. Again, in Dev 9, it's kind of untouched form. In Dev 11, we can see somebody, again, same user, so maybe we need to think about their access. But this user's obviously put in an inactive date. So this record has now been deactivated as of the 1st of January of this year, okay? And hence why it's putting it in orange. So it's making it really, again, making use of color coding to really make it stand out. That record is no longer valid and available. But again, if we look at the example below that, again, this record in Dev 9 does also have an inactive date on it. However, it hasn't highlighted it in orange. And the reason it hasn't is because the end date for this record is in the future. So actually, currently, this record is still available for me to use. However, suddenly on the 1st of January in 2046, it's suddenly going to switch itself off. Okay, so again, maybe that's a future problem, but again, that seems like a bit of an unusual date to be using. Again, is that something that needs a closer look? Okay, scroll down again, we've got some complete records in one environment, not in the other. So again, you can see how clear it makes it in terms of differences coming through. And the last one I'll sort of touch on here is this record again in Dev 9 doesn't exist in Dev 11, and this is a seeded Oracle record. Now, the reason that we have this difference, Dev 9 is on release 26A. Dev 11 is still on 25D. So this is obviously, again, a change made by Oracle. And again, you can see from the record history detail, when obviously this change has been made by Oracle. So it's a completely new record that they've added in as part of the 26A update. Okay, so it allows you to, again, very clearly see the impact of things like the quarterly patch updates as well. Okay. So that's, again, a quick comparison. If we go back and let's stick with financials, what I can do then is you can also run things like, I'll tell it what I'm going to do. I'm going to run an entity level comparison. So I'm going to stick with my Dev 11 environment, but what I'll do now is say, I want to compare my various different business units. So I'll stick with Australia, Canada, do Germany, and then we'll whiz down a bit further to the US one. Where's that? Okay, usually some good data in there. Okay, so I'm going to compare across these 4 business units in the Dev 11 environment. Run options, I'm going to take the standard, but I will again ask it to include my record history. And in terms of the steps, again, these are all the entity level steps. Again, I'll just stick with the options for now and hit submit. Okay, so that's gone off again just to the Dev 11 environment this time. And it is running the compare across those four business units. Again, go into that. Shouldn't take too long. And there we go. Okay, so you can see extremely quick. How long would that take you to sort of go in and try and work that sort of stuff out manually? Okay, so again, if we just very quickly go through this, so we can see the various different, so Australia, Canada, Germany, US 1, we can see the each got a column. Things like the code strings, you probably would expect some differences in here. You'd probably be worried if they weren't different. But again, seeing things side by side, it just provides a much easier way to see, you know, do we have differences where we want to have them? Why have we got this gap over here in Canada? Here we've got some consistency, which is perhaps what we might expect a little bit more of. But probably a bit more worrying is in the invoice options down below here. We can see that these environments across these different entities there's an awful lot of difference here. So again, as you're going through rollouts, ideally, you do want things as consistent as possible because it just keeps the ongoing maintenance easier. And obviously in our environments, these are demo environments, we can see there is an awful lot of deviation from perhaps a kind of a predefined footprint. Okay. So again, hopefully a flavor of the sort of functionality there. And then just very quickly, finally, what I'll do, similar sort of process as I ran earlier. But as I say, you've got the change tracking capability, which is where we utilize what we call baselines. And a baseline, as I mentioned earlier, is a kind of a point in time copy of the settings. And you can then at any point in the future, so once you've run a baseline, so I could have run it a year ago, 10 years ago, but then at any point in the future, I can then use the compare, which I'll do now. I've already run a baseline previously, and I'm going to compare now, good old Dev 11, but rather than a live environment, I'm actually going to run it against a baseline that I've taken probably not that long ago, really. So we'll do, well, let's take this one here. Okay, so it's a baseline. And again, because it's only from a few days ago, I've taken the baseline. I'm going to run it from the Dev 9 baseline. Okay, so comparing a live Dev 11 against a what's the date today? 20. So a 3-day-old baseline, but on the other environment. Again, I'll stick with the same business unit, include the record history, and again, I'll select my favorite options. Okay, there we go. And run that. Okay, so that's again going off in this case to the live Dev 11 instance, and then comparing that with the settings as they were 3 to 4 days ago in the Dev 9 environment. Okay, so again, just whiz through that pretty quickly, open that up. And you don't have to sort of run one report, look at it running, and then run off another one. Obviously, you can just fire off a whole number of different reports and obviously let them sort of run. Okay, so again, just very quickly, you can see here, Dev 11, so my live settings versus what the settings were a few days ago, but as I say, on that Dev 9. So a lot of the differences we'll see here, very, very similar to what we saw in the live to live environment. Okay, so you can see, just gives me that visibility of what change is actually getting introduced over time. Okay, now the last thing I just want to touch on very briefly is again starting to get into that integration with the broader FlexDeploy platform. Okay, and where you can obviously start to make use of things like the pipelines. And the pipelines, again, for those of you who are less familiar with FlexDeploy, you have a very consistent way to manage change as it flows through your various different environments. And again, this is all stuff that you can define to work exactly as you want it to work. But the example of sort of putting up here is where you might utilize the loading and migration functionality. Okay, so again, you can define exactly how you want things to flow through the different environments, and you'll have different approval requirements. So approval gates that have got to be met before any of the deployments can be run. But obviously with the integration with the configuration management side of things, before anything gets deployed to my test environment, first thing might be to approve the plan. Okay, so I'll have a plan of my configuration settings that I want to flow through this process. That needs to go through some sort of approval before sort of going through these load steps. Okay, now before it gets loaded here, we've got this run baseline step. Okay, so what that will do is it will grab a point in time copy of the settings relevant and around the steps that are going to be updated. Once that's run through, that will then run the deployment. It'll then kick off other work elements that need to be done. So if you're sort of integrating back to Jira, for example, setting stuff to in process, and then maybe after that, you'll want it to run a comparison of the live settings that have been updated against the settings that were in the plan to again provide evidence that everything has gone through exactly as expected. Now, if there was any issue, the baseline is then available to help with any sort of rollback you might need to do. Okay, next step might be to run off the functional testing before anything then gets deployed across to the QA environment. Though you can see here a whole bunch of additional gates that need to go through there. Okay, so it needs to pass all the various different gates, the reviews, the approvals. It might then get scheduled to further deployment on QA. So in our case, gets deployed between 10 and 11 in the morning and a weekday. And again, triggers off the various different processes to sort of migrate things through. And then probably in production, maybe even more approval gates that need to go through, or checking back with ServiceNow, and tie stuff up with change management tickets, etc. But again, this is all stuff that can be fully sort of tailored as needed. But you can start to see, hopefully, how the capabilities are being fully integrated through the broader platform. Okay, now I'll sort of stop things there. Again, if you do want to explore any of the functionality in any more detail, do let us know. But I do want to leave a bit of time to sort of cover off some of the other areas and updates in the broader FlexDeploy platform. So Eric, if I hand back to you.
All right, thanks, Gordon. Just 1 second while I share my screen here. All right, and so just like I showed in the presentation earlier, I just want to highlight some of the core changes that are independent of configuration management and really in and around the FlexDeploy platform. And so the first area I want to go into is to cover the deployment audit report that I was talking about. Those that are existing users of FlexDeploy have traditionally used the environment history report to support your audits. And so the deployment audit report is kind of the next evolution of that just makes it easier to consume better insights and more flexibility on how you present the data to make it easier to get through those audits, which can be quite complex and painful, as you know. And so the deployment audit report, the first thing you'll notice, and this does apply to other reports as well, you'll see there's a lot of contextual links to take you within different both FlexDeploy constructs as well as integrations into third-party platforms, whether it's agile planning, service management, etc. So, in this case, we see, and I'm filtered here through a save query where I've, sorted the columns, hid columns, filtered things, right? So you can easily get to it. So I created a save query called audit. And at the top of this report, you can see that for EBS, there was a deployment of an Allied 1 package. And if I hover, I will see all the details of what was contained within that package. In this particular deployment, I'm filtered only showing production, which is what you typically do for an audit, although you may use this report for other insights across other environments as well. But scrolling to the right, similar information from the environment history report, but again, you've got links into the different FlexDeploy constructs. But a couple columns that exist here within the deployment audit report that aren't within environment history are insights that show you the different governance gates that have gone through, right? Whether it's things like I've executed successfully my set of automated tests as part of this delivery. Maybe I have a ServiceNow approval where I can hover and see that it was linked to a particular change, and I can even see from a ServiceNow perspective who changed it. In this case, it was Luke Wilson just a few days ago. And then similarly, for the work items, if you're using Agile planning, it will be listed here and a link to view the details of the issue. And that's going to help provide context of not just what deployed, but help describe why it was changed and deployed. The other thing within this audit report was something that we've had requests for in the past. It's to be able to tailor the column names so that it's more applicable for your particular organization. So for example, this very generic and technical approval and quality check column, maybe I want to rename this to something like governance. So if I do that, you'll see that that will be reflected on the screen as soon as I save this particular, one second, it's hidden for me. There we go. And so now you can see that that column name has changed, and that will be applied to your save query. So you can have different names for different columns depending on the context of how you're using it, and that will be saved within your save queries that you can then share with other groups and users across the organization. The next item that I want to show is the in-app notifications. So for people that are existing FlexDeploy users, you know that we've long had support for notifications via email or collaboration tools like Teams and Slack based on events that have happened in FlexDeploy. But these days, modern web applications have notifications within the applications themselves, often denoted by, the little bell icon here. So you can see with the badge that I have one event that I have not yet seen. So if I click on the bell, I'll see the various different events. I have it quite verbose with the events I'm being notified on since I use this environment for demos. But you can see a little earlier today, I did some builds and deployments. So I have notifications that those have completed. And then if I click on the context link, that'll take me into the execution. And so this is a pretty standard use, as you see in other applications where once you view the notification, the badge goes away. You can acknowledge these so that you don't see them anymore. And then there's also the ability, if you don't like the way things are formatted, you can go into notification templates. And so here you can see the various different events, and I've selected that I want to make it available for both notification through email or in app. And then I can also drill in, and if I don't like the format of how things are displayed, that's exposed as well. There are, of course, defaults, but you can tailor it to meet the needs of your organization. And then the final item that I want to show, let me go to the dashboards. We talked about the health monitoring. So I have a report that I put together called the health dashboard. And this is capturing a whole myriad of Oracle infrastructure related metrics as it pertains to FlexDeploy and configuration management platform. So things like monitoring the CPU, the memory, disk usage, worker threads, all sorts of information, including the database. And just like with the dashboard before, there's a new set of metrics here under monitoring. And so you'll see there's about 15 different metrics here. And so it works the same way, where you can just drag these metrics into the dashboard and tailor the inputs so you're seeing the data that you want to see. So this is both useful to know if you're facing bottlenecks or thresholds due to the infrastructure, but also enables our support team to kind of help you understand if that's what's going on and help you resolve the issue in the support process. One other little subtle change here is that, let's say I want to update this dashboard. Previously, when you had inputs that you could configure here, we just made it a little bit more consistent. So when you drag it in, it works like workflows and pipelines, and you'll be prompted for any inputs that you want to tailor. But again, these dashboards can then be shared with other users across the organization. So you're all looking at the same consistent view of the data so you can make informed decisions. The other thing that I failed to mention when I was talking about the monitoring is there's also a way to be able to enable different alerts. So if you want to get notified if your CPU threshold exceeds 75%, you can simply add those alerts. There's a little template wizard that allows you to pick what you're interested in. Maybe it's high CPU, and you want to be notified if that exceeds the 80% limit. So if I add that, I can then define, which groups or users should be notified. Maybe you want to pick the administrators and click save. So now as this monitor runs, if this condition is met, these users will be notified either in app or email notification. And finally, there's configuration to determine how often do you want to check those metrics and send the alerts. The default is 10 minutes kind of across the stack, which is probably an appropriate level, but you may want to increase that. You certainly wouldn't want an alert every minute, because that's going to flood your notifications before you get a chance to resolve the issue. So with that, I'll stop sharing and hand it back to Ash to kind of wrap things up.
I'm having some trouble sharing. Oh, what's going on here?
If you want, Ash, should we dive into some questions?
Yeah. Can you drive into questions?
Okay.
I can't share.
I can
Absolutely
share the presentation.
So thanks, Eric. While you do that, okay, there was a number of questions that we have in the chat. For sure, keep them coming. If there's additional questions that we're not able to get to during this time, we will follow up after. So the first question, does this work on all of the OSs? And this question was during the config management part. Earlier, it was compatible with Windows only.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Sorry, I'm getting messages saying it can't hear me. Yes, so this is now running. So this is available as a SaaS offering or kind of customer managed on premise. But yeah, that sort of issue around the OS, what it supports, etc., that kind of goes away with that. Okay, so yeah, that sort of stuff is no longer any sort of, it's not relevant. It's a browser-based access point. So everything you saw when I went through the demo, it was really being driven through my browser, and obviously that would work with any OS.
Great. Can you compare a baseline file generated in ConfigSnapshot to the current situation in FlexDeploy, or do the file formats differ?
So the existing XML baselines from ConfigSnapshot current to, I'd need to take that one away and have a look. I know that there will be an awful lot of commonality, but there may be a few tweaks here and there. So again, it depends probably a little bit on exactly what it is you want to compare. So I would say in quite a lot of cases you probably can. However, that does need to be validated. I would need to check that. Okay, but behind the scenes, a lot of what has come through from ConfigSnapshot. ConfigSnapshot has always been heavily metadata driven, so it's not like it's a complete start from scratch application. Obviously, it has a glossy new front end, etc., new user interface, taking advantage of all the technology, but it's not a completely new application. It's all that sort of functionality exists there, and hence why the structure of the things like the baselines will certainly be very, very similar. But as I say, there may be a few issues or slight differences, but yeah, sort of reach out to us and we can sort of perhaps review that with you in a little bit more detail.
Yep, absolutely. I will take that one and we will reach out again. So this question is, does it work within the UK government cage, and can it access private cloud customers?
As long as they are accessible, and we do have some that are on that cage. So it does work. It has a proven track record. I can't tell you who, etc. But yes.
Wonderful. That's part of that private cloud and the cage. I'm assuming why we can't talk too much about that. Is it so when we're talking about the new monitoring in the larger platform, Eric, is it possible for these monitors to be fed to ServiceNow or any other webhook?
I would have to check on that. I'm not entirely sure, but I understand what the question is. So based on an alert being triggered, whether sending it just as notification in FlexDeploy, but having a third-party hook into systems like ServiceNow. So that's a good question, but I'll have to follow up on that. I'm sure off the top of my head.
Okay. One of these questions was about the dashboard you showed, Eric, and it was, will this dashboard become part of the next release? So I think the question is about creating the monitoring report and adding it to the dashboard, and if it will be templatized.
Yeah, so what I showed was actually what was released as part of V10. So I'm not sure if the dashboard, if there's a default dashboard, but you can certainly recreate that exact dashboard by creating a new one and bringing in all those metrics onto the page.
All right. Let's see. Okay. Will there be any new APIs exposed with this integration with the combined platform? I think that's the question, Raymond, and correct me in the chat if I'm wrong.
So I think at the high level, right, everything we're doing within configuration management, like what we've released in V10, the ability to run reports, do comparisons, generate baselines, compare live environments to baseline, that's all enabled through the APIs. So in fact, the example Gordon showed with doing the baseline and the comparison within the pipeline, that's ultimately driving APIs that we've exposed into configuration management to complete that task. So yes, those will be exposed to customers as well, or are exposed to customers.
Great. Is health monitoring available both on cloud and on premise? Any differences?
It's a feature equivalent across both.
Great. All right, it looks like there's some additional questions about the UK government cage question. We can take that offline and make sure that we have all of the answers to your specific questions as those are, unique to the UK government. All right, we are at about the top of the hour. I know there's a number more questions. Certainly, we will take any question that we were not able to answer and get that out to the larger group. Or get that out, at least answered individually, and any that are FAQs, we will follow up as well. I did want to give one plug for the upcoming Flexagon Forum, what used to be the FlexDeploy user group, but this is now expanded to the larger group. We're super excited to have all of you as customers, coming together with these two companies. So the Flexagon Forum is really just an opportunity to talk with other users of the larger Flexagon platform, whether that's the configuration management capabilities, the original ConfigSnapshot, or the DevOps capabilities, the original FlexDeploy. So it's a good opportunity for you to talk with other users, but also to talk with the people behind making the product. So you can talk with the product engineers, whether that's sharing your best practices, asking questions of others, how they've maybe solved some challenges, and just hearing insights from others. So the next meeting is going to be Wednesday, February 11th. And as part of the follow-up to this webinar, when you get the recording and the deck, you will also get the information to register for that event. So please keep an eye out for that. And I'll turn it over to Ash to wrap it up.
Right. Can you hear me now, or am I still muted?
Nope, we can hear you.
All right. Well, a large thank you to everybody who attended. I hope you were blown away with the demo as I was. Every time I see the incredible progress our engineering team have made, I get very excited. So look forward to additional feedback you might provide us or our sales teams. But thank you very much for your time today, and look forward to seeing you either at the user group or maybe at one of the shows and events we attend this year. So take care, everybody. Thank you very much. And to the presenters, thank you very much indeed.
Thanks all.
Okay, cheers all.